All right, welcome to another episode of Servant Leadership Library, where we serve up wisdom from leaders who know the real power comes from lifting up others. I'm your host, Nicholas Paulukow, CEO of One-to-One Incorporated, your trusted managed IT and cybersecurity firm. Today, we are welcoming a Lancaster legend who not just smashes it in the boardroom, but also on the tennis court. Robert Kintner is a long-life Lancaster native, a proud Millersville University alumni, and a fun fact, a three-time Pennsylvania State High School tennis double championship. Wowza. So, by day, Rob serves as part of the LEPCO executive team, where he juggles treasury management, HR, IT, and other things most of us couldn't even dream of balancing. But by night, or let's face it, whenever he's not working, he's a tennis fanatic, nonprofit leader, a Hall of Famer who's been serving Lancaster's youth through Tennis Central for 15 years. But beyond the courts and spreadsheets, Rob is dedicated to his family, a world traveler, and a competitive swimmer who believes his greatest fortune lies in the critical mentors and colleagues he's worked with over the last 25 years of his career. Today, he's here to share his insights on leadership, service, and maybe a few tips on how to get that perfect backhand. Get ready for an ace on the episode with Robert. So welcome, Robert. Good to see you today. I'm excited to have you. And why don't you kind of tell the audience a little bit more about yourself? I got to tell you, I got to learn that backhand because I am terrible on the court, but I enjoy it. But why don't you also then tell too a little bit about your career progression?
No, that's great. Thanks, Nick. It's exciting to be on the podcast this morning. And my career right out of school has taken a lot of exciting twists and turns, and I've done a lot of great and fun things. I started out in the financial world on a bond trading desk and learned the financial world from that perspective. So I was within the investment world for several years, and I just kind of looking back to before I got there. You had mentioned the sports, the swimming, the tennis. I have. There's a lot of competitiveness in me, and I think that was really what drove me into the business. I had a young family, so being competitive, that really helped me move forward. And I was very lucky to work with some people that were leaders, mentors, still are of mine, and have kind of brought me under their wing, and had some great opportunities to work with some great people over the years. I did that. I was in the investment financial world for a very long time, financial services. And a good friend of mine, Jeff Clark, who happens to be the president of LEPCO, Lawn Equipment Parts Company. We served on the Tennis Central board together, but we've played tennis together since I was a teenager. And I've been a family friend of the Clarks, it's a family ownership at LEPCO. And they had their longtime CFO retire, which he reached out to me, and I pursued the opportunity and was fortunate enough to earn a spot here as initially the controller and director of HR. Over the last 8 years, have learned all the certainly the financial operations and learned inside and out of the company. So I've been I'm now in the position of CFO, and still maintain, of course, the HR and oversee the IT effort here at LEPCO.
That's
That's kind of in a nutshell the last 25 plus years.
I mean, I think we all have to know. Do you still play tennis with the boss, and do you let him win, or do you still compete? I got to know.
So we both compete. We've been on the same. Matter of fact, as a doubles team, we've played together a lot.
Okay.
And we've had tremendous success as a doubles team over the years. We've gone to the regional and national level. We've played together on the same team. we do compete against each other. And we're both very competitive, and we have a lot of fun with that. And I don't, I have pockets where I play a lot now, and then other times I don't. But I do tennis to me has always been a way to kind of release that competitive spirit, and
Yeah.
whereas golf, on the other hand, is more of a hobby and something I know I'm not that great at.
Yeah, I feel you. I feel you. I enjoy golfing, but it's one thing that you got to practice, just like anything else, right?
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
that's great. That was a good answer, by the way, on do you compete against, the owner of the company or the president of the company. So that was good. That was good. I forgot about the double, so that makes sense. That's probably pretty fun to be able to work together in that manner outside of work.
Yeah, I can pivot with the best of them when it comes to some of those questions. So, uh, but it's certainly there's business, and then the separation as far as friendship,
Yeah.
and certainly we enjoy our opportunities to outside of the business to play tennis, hang out, and it's worked out incredibly well.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. You talk a lot about mentorship, and I think that's an amazing thing. And you've said you've had a lot of mentors. Can you kind of explain what you mean, like to you? What is that mentor? What have they provided? How did they help you?
Absolutely. Mentors, um, they're not over a career. People kind of find their way, but I think as you find your way, you look to people to, um, you look at people you have the utmost respect for,
Mm,
and kind of help you along. And as I said, I'm very fortunate to have those people throughout my career. And some maybe say they have one mentor in life.
yeah.
I've had many, and part of that is just the different roles that I've had.
Mm,
I've worked with some very sharp, experienced people. Um, some were maybe 30, 40 years older than me. And,
wow.
I learned an incredible amount of, from the trades, the things that I was doing from those people. And I always make sure that I credit them, because
Mm,
I really truly believe that without them, I wouldn't be where I am today, and I wouldn't have the opportunities that I have today.
mm,
So, whether it's through networks, through business, socialization, just through hard work, you meet these people,
mm,
and you develop relationships, and then you certainly see those that will help guide you along the way. And
yeah.
again, in my current role, interesting enough, Jeff, and his father Merrill, who's the founder of LEPCO, have tremendous respect for them, and
Mm,
the things that they've accomplished. So again, I can point as you go down, starting today, down to when I finished college, of those
yeah.
people, and even through high school for that matter. But
Yeah.
that's something that I think um, is a life skill that just doesn't come naturally. You have to
Yeah.
embrace it,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of people should take advantage of the people that they interact with,
Yeah.
from the standpoint that they can really help, and not to overuse the word, but help mentor them as
Right.
they develop.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think a lot of times people think, oh man, I have to do this all on my own. And I have to say that in the beginning of my career, I was like, wow, I have to figure this out on my own until I really found out that you can supercharge your competitiveness and excitement to move things through by finding somebody that's been there and done that and is willing to share it.
Yeah,
I found pretty quickly as an entrepreneur, there wasn't other entrepreneurs. There's people that led businesses and they're like, well, I don't know. This is just how we do it. And it was interesting to then finally find
yeah,
people like you had mentioned that are like minded. But one mentor told me a while ago, goes, I am just a season in your life. So you may or may not outgrow me, but the day that you do, you need to find someone else to work with so that you can continue to grow. And that's neat. It sounds like you've had many to really get you to where you're at today. I'm so curious though still, how do you go from trading to then doing like controller and CFO work? Like to me it seems so different.
Yeah. Well, and you, a lot of people, they look at my title, which unfortunately is very long, but it, the HR side of it was certainly something that I didn't have traditional
Okay.
experience.
Okay.
And one of the things that I really had to work at, and certainly again, utilizing the resources and had that ability to use those HR resources around me, which are pretty abundant these days.
Yeah.
Um, but I was in the financial services. I advised nonprofit organizations in
Okay.
healthcare, higher education, even municipalities.
Okay.
And I was familiar with certainly finance
Yeah.
and various financial instruments,
Okay.
especially on the financing side, whether it was bonds or bank loans, et cetera,
Okay.
um, and other complex instruments like derivatives and things of that nature. So I had a baseline on the financial end of things.
Yeah.
Um, what's different here is you're focused on one organization,
Yeah.
and but you get to know that organization
That's
extremely
right.
well, and certainly I know it inside. I know LEPCO inside and out now. Um, on the HR side, it took some work, some training, but I always tell people, I said one of the fundamental um, uh, things when it comes to HR is being able to work with people. And so if you're not willing or that's not your cup of tea, then certainly that would be an issue in the HR world. But I've always been I feel like I've been a people person over the
Yeah.
and I've developed that through the networks I've been able to build over the years with people, and so I felt very comfortable, and certainly working with Jeff on a nonprofit board, he saw my experience working with a board
Ah.
and certainly
Okay.
other uh, colleagues out there. So I think he had a sense that he knew who I was as far as working with people, and I've felt pretty comfortable. Certainly, the rules and regulations you need to know those for
Yeah.
compliance purposes.
Right.
But those are things, if you engage in the right resources, you can get up to speed. You work at it, and so that's kind of how I found this home.
That's neat. It sounds like a lot of learning all the time is the key. And we talk about Lebco, right? Like I'm so impressed when I go into the organization, you have and you talk meld kind of this HR piece to it too. There's so many people that you talk to that are long tenured employees. And so I can only imagine that that potentially comes from a really great set of leaders. I mean, could you kind of tell us a little bit about the organization and the leadership and how that's developed because that's pretty unique, right? Like
Yes.
as of today's society, there isn't as much tenure such as that. So we want to know the secret sauce here.
Yeah, this, the people tell the story about LEPCO,
Mm.
and our average years of service are, I think it's probably 12, 13 years
Wow.
today, and that's actually come down. We've retired 30, 40-year plus
Wow.
employees since I've been here over the last 8 years, several, and so you know we've had some employees that this has been the only company that they've worked for,
Wow.
and you really don't hear that anymore. I mean,
No.
it's very uncommon. Um, I believe it's the company. It's a people first company, and there's a lot of companies that are out there and like to use the kind of it's a family, and that's our culture. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of companies, they strive for that to the degree they can, and based on the size that they are, that's can sometimes be very
Right.
challenging. Certainly I believe, in that sweet spot where we have been able to maintain that, even though we've grown from one employee to now about 86.
Wow.
But from a leadership standpoint, we're very lean. We don't have several layers of management. Um, our layer of management, if you look at each core area or functional area of our business, they have been employees here for a very long time.
Wow.
Matter of fact, some have started at the very lowest level, if you will, and have built their way up into a management level. And that's not. I think you had kind of mentioned at one point or another that, you know, that doesn't just come natural. I mean, you
Right.
certainly earn it from a time perspective, but from a skill set, just because you've been a long-term employee doesn't mean you become a manager or supervisor.
Yeah.
You have to build that skill set. And
Mm.
so that takes investment in the company to be able to help you build those skills to put you in that position. Um, I, I don't know that anyone would feel, I mean, maybe from a pay perspective, that would be great. They get promoted to a
Yeah.
manager, but they got to be able to feel comfortable and have the skills to do the job. And that's what we try to evaluate before we would put someone in that position. Or if we saw that future, or that future possibility, then we start helping to provide the skills and the resources to surround
Mm.
them. So when that time does come, that everyone feels comfortable moving into taking that next step.
I like that. And what would you or a Lebco define like leadership to be? Like, what are maybe the top three skills that they have to be a leader in your organization?
So I think, delegation is something. I don't know if that's number one, but certainly a good leader, and delegation means you're not a micromanager.
Yeah.
You build your team, you trust them to do their job, you provide them the structure to make decisions and to do work independently, but at the same time are working and communicating within their department. And so I think delegation is something that I actually had to develop a little bit when I first got here. I came from more of an environment of kind of doing it all
Ah,
myself.
okay.
Now I had resources around me, but a lot of the administrative, the decision making, the preparedness, all came directly from me. So when I first got here, I had to make sure that I was utilizing my team and trusting them to do that work, the work given their role. And we've built a great team here, not just those that I directly oversee, but throughout the company. We have a very good core team. Um, but outside of delegation, I think you have to be willing to work with people.
Mm.
Again, they uh, those employees that you oversee or manage will look at you and see your work ethic, the things that
Mm.
you do. It's like a young child who is, taking everything in and learning, and hearing everything that you say. They pick those things up.
Mm.
If it's bad, they'll pick those things up. If it's good, they'll pick those things up. Unfortunately, the bad sometimes gets, are the things that may stick sometimes. So you have to really lead by example. And, we, of course, hear that all the time. So I think, uh, that's important. Showing that work ethic, making the right decisions, being inclusive, um,
Mm.
um, team building are things that I think are just a few things. There's a lot of probably intangibles, things that maybe don't even have words, that would
Right.
surround a good leader.
Well, and I think what I'm hearing from you is it has nothing to do with the individual, meaning you specifically, as you using yourself as an example, is that it had to do with the people. It had nothing to do with you necessarily. It had to do about them. And I think that's a really true word. We kind of segue a little bit into, like, we talk about servant leadership. From the leadership standpoint, what is the difference in your mind as a servant leader?
Um, the, as a servant leader, from the standpoint of someone that's I guess a servant leader is someone that continues to look at opportunities to in roles to provide leadership. I don't that's what it means to me. So when I
Mm,
think of that, I think of the nonprofit organizations that I support and have provided
mm,
leadership. I look at even personally at home and within the family, providing the leadership, to you know build and a great foundation of a family and extended family and friendships,
mm.
and then in the workplace, certainly, in the roles that I've played, I've tried to provide as much leadership and look for those opportunities when I can. So, a servant leader to me is not just one aspect of life. It's not one role, but it's
Mm.
really utilizing leadership in everything you do, and that's not that just doesn't happen. I mean, um, you have to work at that, and I think there's some very hard work and things that you need to do over years. It's not
Right,
tomorrow that
right.
would maybe put you in that position.
I like that. And as you talk about that, from a young professional, or maybe even somebody in your organization that's new, that maybe is just out of college, and they want to, like, foster understanding leadership and developing their skills or careers, or even working in their community. I mean, what advice would you give them as they kind of start to kind of build their understanding around leadership?
So I think the things that we've talked here during the podcast, as far as building your network, being involved in
Mm,
organizations, um, being involved within the company, developing you know uh, professional professionals relationships, personal relationships, friendships. I think developing those mentors. But the more that you can participate in those types of uh, organizations, nonprofit organizations,
mm,
giving back, I think would certainly serve people very well. And that's something
mm,
that I think, if you're looking for opportunities, a job, that's something that people really connect well with is
mm.
um, understanding what you've done, not just in for work, but even outside of that. How you've developed that network. Um,
Yeah.
I think that's helped put people in a place where they can be successful. And again, we not everyone knows everything, so building that network is also building that ability to find answers,
Mm.
to bounce ideas, and I think that helps people again grow and become successful down the road.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing from you is kind of that humility, right? Are you willing to be humble enough to ask for help, or to work with other organizations, give your time? I think that that's really, really important. And I kind of segue into a little bit of kind of where you've gone with that. I mean, as the president of the Tennis Central, right? Like,
Yes.
how do you, right? We talk about, like, leadership in business, and many people would be like, well, they're the boss, we have to listen to them. But now we switch to, like,
Yeah.
an area that you're volunteering your time. How do you lead through that, or how do you mentor young professionals that are trying to work in their sport? Like, how do you change what you know from a working environment to this, like, volunteer side of things?
Yeah, so I felt, tennis has opened a lot of doors for me. I've met a lot of people through tennis. And as again, Jeff Clark being the president of LEPCO, good friend of mine over the years. I met him through tennis, and so I think it's it's important to kind of give back to the things that have put you in a
Ah,
successful position. And so Tennis Central has been that vehicle for me. It's been my opportunity to give back to the sport and to the youth and provide them the opportunities and resources, not just from the game of tennis, but just from the life skills that I
mm,
developed through the sport of tennis. I think you see that a lot with other sports organizations, nonprofit organizations.
yeah,
It yes, it's about the sport, and certainly there's going to be those handful that excel, and you want to continue to help financially support them to hopefully have for a full scholarship and
right.
and maybe even continue on professionally if that's possible. But really, most you're looking to develop as people
Mm,
and provide them the skills. And so many sports organizations, it's not just about the sport, it's about the educational opportunities, the life
mm,
skills. And I think it's important that those organizations continue to look to partner those two together. And and that's what Tennis Central has done.
ah, that's neat.
And so we've been focused on not just the inner city, but really anyone that is looking for any youth that's looking for the resources to build that, not just the tennis skill set, but certainly the life side as well.
Right. It sounds like when I hear you talk, it kind of it gives you a purpose, like a meaning and a goal, which I think is really amazing, which sometimes I think we lose, right? Like we think about this competitiveness all the time, which is fun,
Yeah.
right? But at the end of the day, you're teaching kind of skills on how to improve themselves or develop, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great organizations out there, and certainly anyone can partner with any organization, and that's what they should do, to try to
Mm,
select an organization they feel passionately about, whether it's something that they can go back to, from a standpoint of giving back. They can give back to any organization. For
right.
me, it was directly from something that impacted my life, and that was
Mm,
tennis. And I think you see that a lot with people, the things that they want to give back to or what they're passionate about. And so that's kind of where I've landed. I've certainly supported a lot of other organizations, but that's where I've spent, and volunteered my time for many years. And Tennis Central has been an organization that's been around since the 1970s. So
wow.
it's a very deeply rooted organization, and tennis in Lancaster, small little town of Lancaster, actually is the depth um, of excellence, if you will, in the sport of
Really?
tennis,
Wow.
not just from the tennis accomplishments, but from the people and the
Mm.
professional accomplishments. It runs. We have some great history here.
Oh, that's amazing. And we thank you for the work that you've done for that. I mean, we also talk about like, you have it seems like a lot on your plate, right? Like how do you balance people and process can be a challenge as a leader? Like how do you prioritize the human aspect that you've been speaking about of leadership and kind of like day-to-day operations? Like that could be a challenge, I would assume.
Yeah, I mean, when you wear multiple hats, and I'm not the only one. I think it's pretty common within our company. Again, we're all incentivized to stay lean, and so I think there's a lot of us that will do what we need to do to continue to
Mm,
add value to the company. But I think in a leadership role, you need to really engage with your team, and I think that is a priority. and so as you manage your time, and certainly there's a lot of things that need to be done individually, but certainly you need to make sure that the team has all the resources and the things that they need on a day-to-day basis to successfully complete their job.
Mm,
And then you certainly you define the other times where you can accomplish the things that you are
mm,
directly responsible for executing. And so that's the daily. I mean, that's the daily grind. In addition to that, I mean, certainly you have the balance, the work-life balance, and
mm.
certainly as we're talking about the nonprofit um, uh, time, supporting the organization. So I think it's good to stay busy. I think if there's times where everyone should pause, but there's also, life can be short, so you want to make the
Yeah.
best of every day,
Yeah.
and so I think everyone owes it to themselves to live every day, and and feel good about everything that they're doing
Mm.
every day that we're grinding away. So
Yeah, that reminds me kind of, you talked earlier about like achieving so much in your career, right? And yet you emphasize now like the importance of the family aspect, right? Like how do you balance like your professional success because you're like a competitive person, right?
yeah.
With the personal service to those that are like close to you, right? Like it's kind of a very fine balance, I would assume.
It is. I mean, family, I think for most is certainly the number one priority. And as from a professional standpoint, from a charitable giving standpoint, or volunteering of time, you have all these things that you need to balance. And I mean, there's ways to do it and to be very successful. I think I've found that balance. There are times where volunteering or being actively involved in an organization outside of the workplace may not be like the right time. So I mean,
Right.
it,
Right.
it's good to be involved when you can, but at the same time, I would always suggest maybe step back and see if it's the right time. It
Mm,
may not be for some.
mm.
For those that are trying to build a career, in their 20s, early 30s, there's going to be times where they need to be solely focused on developing that work ethic and
Right.
evolving from in the workplace. Um, but there will be, as they develop, there will be opportunities, and as they kind of define their time, where they could come back and support an organization. And I've kind of done that with Tennis Central. I was the president in the early 2000s, left the organization for a pocket of time, and then
Okay.
I came back again.
Ah,
So I, that to me, that was, again, that was life, that was business, developing my career, and finally found an opportunity to come back to Tennis Central and help lead that organization.
there. Yeah, that's great. And I think I've heard, or maybe you would agree or disagree, but there's seasons, right? There's seasons that you can give your time. There's seasons that you can give your money because you can't give your time,
Right.
right? And you just have a happy balance of what you're capable of doing. But I think sometimes that's hard, right? Because you think that if you want to give, something else gives, right? and
Yeah.
and it's that real balance that you talk about, and it goes in waves, I guess, right? Like it changes.
It really does, and I think that is the case. Is some can't give their time,
Right.
um, but they can support an organization in other ways, whether it's
Yeah.
in-kind donations or it's dollars. There's ways, a lot of different ways to support an organization, a organization in need, and so I think those are things that, people just need to over their careers, over their life, need to make those decisions whether they can do it or not. I do think it is important at somewhere along the line to engage. I think professionally that will help people grow. It's
Yeah.
not for everyone, but
Right.
to be a servant leader, I
Yeah.
think that those are things that will put you in that position.
I love that. I love that connection too. I'm going to kind of go back to your younger self, right? So if you think back to when you started in your career, what one piece of advice would you give yourself now that with all the wisdom that you have today? Like what's one piece of advice to give yourself?
Things, something that I would actually change, or just I would give to someone else, advice
Oh,
wise.
I would say one thing that maybe you would change or do differently for yourself.
So the one thing, I guess I can speak to both of them um, very directly. So the one thing that I think it was important for me was developing a work ethic very early, and that was through tennis and swimming, but that was also
Mm.
through working odd jobs, whether it was, I worked for Play It Again Sports.
Oh, all right.
I worked as a maintenance person over at the local country club on the tennis courts. So I mowed grass. It's a common job for those in
Yes,
their
that's right.
teens. They're mowing lawns for money, or shoveling snow. Those types of things. But that helped me develop certainly a work ethic.
Mm,
But things that I would have done, it's everyone likes to say, you know what, I wouldn't change a thing. I don't. There's certainly things that I probably could have engaged in more when I was in high school. There might have been some organizations that I probably should have tried to be more
uh,
involved with in the high school years. Um, you know, Academics. I was not a books type person. I was kind of a real life experience, and that's how I've built my career, with hands
mm,
on the job learning. And with a young family in college, I didn't have time to continue to build on the education front. Obtaining
mm,
my MBA, I needed to get my degree and really get into the workforce
right.
and start developing there, and which is fortunately what I was able to accomplish. But that was not easy for a while. So I think from the academia side, I would certainly have probably done some things differently. But it's really hard when you're trying to excel in a
Right.
sport, and there's a lot of kids that are doing this, and I have a ton of respect for the accomplishments when it's not just the sport, but their academics are equal or even greater. Their
Mm,
accomplishments on the academic side are
right.
even greater than the sport, which is really impressive. So I think that's probably, if I had to look back, I think that would have been maybe a little bit more of a focus of mine. But that's easier said now than
Right.
than
That's
then,
right.
trying to be a teenager and growing up. So
I appreciate that candor. And we talk about coaches, right? Has there ever been a coach that really was a struggle for you, right? That you really had a hard time working with? And if so, kind of how do you relate that maybe experience that you went through to now that you're in the workforce, right?
yeah, you know, ha- a a difficult experience with a coach. Some may be able to equate that to a difficult experience with their manager or
Mm,
supervisor. And you know, I had, you know, again, I was fortunate. I was able to work with a lot of tennis coaches, also swim coaches, but mostly the tennis coaches. I spent a lot of time with on the court and traveling, and I connected with a lot of them. Um, in college, there was a coach that we didn't see eye to eye
Mm,
on some things, and that was difficult for a time period. But we ultimately sat down and
mm,
talked about our differences, kind of set
mm,
maybe the expectations, and I think that was a learning experience for me and probably the coach,
mm,
on kind of working through a some tough things, some differences, and I think that, again, I look back at those types of experiences, and that's kind of helped me be the person I am today, and be able to work through those things. And from the opposite side, being able to work through those in the
mm.
appropriate way. Um, I've taken a little bit of each of those coaches or mentors or managers of my own over the years, and I've used that to my benefit.
That's a very mature thing, though, at college to be able to sit your coach down, right? And have that conversation. I mean, that's impressive, right? Some kids might just say, "Well, I disagree. I'm just gonna quit." You leaned into the uncomfortableness. I can imagine maybe there was a mentor in that process too. I don't know.
There actually was, and it wasn't the coach himself. It was actually the athletic director, who I
Ah,
had a ton of respect for, and he was the reason I went to, and this was at Bloomsburg, and before I went to Millersville, and the athletic director there at the time, he's just a tremendous person, had a ton of respect for. The coach, I do as well, and we had some differences, and we worked
yeah.
it out, which it meant a lot to be able to sit down with those two, and work things out.
Mm, I love it. I love it. So, kind of as we start to work through kind of wrapping up today, I'm really curious about this one. What do you think kind of the next generation of leaders needs to focus on to kind of embody, leadership in general, especially with the increasing like digital and fast-paced kind of world, right? Like we
Yeah,
seem to be missing, we're face to face to a screen and not a person, right? And
yeah.
so like how do you see that what do you think the next generation of leaders needs to focus on?
They got to get out there,
Mm,
and the remote work, is there's a lot of benefits to it, but the things that we've talked about through this podcast, with having mentors and developing those personal relationships, those networks,
mm,
those only happen if you're out there
mm,
and part of those organizations. It's fine to work in a remote workplace, but you do have to, as we're talking about balancing time, find those opportunities where you can get out, and even if it's within your own company,
right,
you know, want to go to home base and have lunch with someone, even if it's not a meeting,
right,
and try to develop those relationships. If there's someone that, if it's your manager or someone else that has succeeded and is doing very well, I mean, you want to tap into those types of resources and get to know those folks. And so I think that's not it's in this day and age, it's probably more difficult.
mhm,
But I'm not active on social media. There's certainly a lot of great things that come out of social media, but I think your voice should be directly with the people that you're working with,
mm,
your network, and not through that social avenue.
right.
I certainly, that supports who you are, or some of the things that you believe in, but how you really develop those relationships is getting out there in front of people, and that is a little bit old school, but that's speaking from my experience. That's kind of where I've landed.
Yeah, getting in front of people, being vulnerable, being open, I think really creates those relationships that you talk about. As we kind of talk about legacy, like what is your hope? As a leader, professionally, personally, like what do you want to leave as a legacy?
Yeah, I think I look back at the things that the accomplishments, the things that I've done over my career, business wise, personally, volunteer wise, and so I think everyone as they go through their career are hopefully taking steps to build ultimately that legacy and making an impact directly with LEPCO. I've been here 8 years now, and we've tried to make a lot of decisions, not for just the time period that I'm going to be working here, but well beyond the
Mm,
decisions that have been made, the investments that have been made in the company are what I believe will uh, improve, make us more efficient for years to come. And
mm,
certainly, you know, we of course work together technology wise. That's always going to be changing, and where we're at 5 years
mm,
from now will look a lot different. But but given where we're at today, we've been making those decisions like we are looking ahead to that 5, 10 year, down the road mark. I think everything that I try to look at from a leadership standpoint is not just making decisions for here and now, but for the future. And I think those future decisions ultimately will also define that legacy.
mm.
And we want people to at the company, and we've had this. We have those long-term employees who've retired here, successfully retired, that they have left their legacy here because of the impacts that they've had, and we're trying to pick that up and hopefully deliver the same in our
Mm.
careers.
I love it. What an answer of a perfect servant leader, right? It was about the greater good in mind. I really appreciate that.
Well,
I-
you speaking from the heart. I think that it comes naturally. Um,
yeah,
it's not it's different for everyone, but
yeah.
that's my take and my lens.
I appreciate that. And it's kind of as we wrap up today, what books or resources or things would you be able to share? You talked a lot about learning and education. Is there anything that you could point anyone listening today that would be helpful for them?
So I'm not, and I think I admitted this during the podcast. I'm not a real books type person. I'm more on the kind of living the experience, if you will, and,
Yeah.
and learning that way. And that could be a difficult way to learn sometimes. But I think we've talked about building networks. I think one thing that has helped me be successful is not just the team of employees that we have here at LEPCO, but um, outside resources like consultants, those that are experts in their particular area,
Mm,
and be able to utilize them on things that you may not deal with
mm,
on an everyday basis. So where I spend a lot of my time is developing those relationships, talking
mm.
with those people, whether there's a direct purpose or it's just picking their brain, so to speak,
Right.
on certain topics. But you want to utilize those consultants, those outside resources to hopefully better your decision making within the organization, and bettering the organization itself. So that's where I spend a lot of my time. I engage the financial world is something that I have a significant interest in. So I'm certainly engaged in a lot of the financial articles, learning about companies, but that's not necessarily a book. That's just the
Resources.
resources that are out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, I like
Um,
that.
so that's kind of my spin on things. There's a lot of books out there that I have read that certainly there's some great information, great takeaways. Most of those are kind of real life skill based type books, not
Yeah.
necessarily the the Harry Potter set of books or
Yeah. Yes.
anything. But I when I do read, it's those things that would better me as a person or professionally.
I like that. And any, as we kind of close today, any parting comments, feedback, words of wisdom that you'd like to share?
Well, again, I thank you for the opportunity to talk with you. This has been a lot of fun. Hopefully there's some takeaways for those that may listen to the podcast. For me, I just, I think there's always a path. Everyone's path is a little bit different. I shared today a little bit of my path over my career, the things that have put me in the position where I'm at today. And I can't stress enough, work ethic and building those mentors, and
Mm,
working with them to continue to develop. And that again, that's not just the workplace, but that's personally, from a volunteer nonprofit organization standpoint. It's really, that's again, when we talk about servant leaders, to me it's everything that a individual is involved with, and that's how, those are the steps that help build people into servant leaders.
I appreciate that, Rob. It's been a wonderful time today, and everyone. Well, that's a wrap on today's ace-filled episode of Servant Leadership Library. A huge thank you to Rob for serving up not just wisdom, but a masterclass in balancing spreadsheets, tennis rackets, and a heart for service. From leading LEPCO's operations to mentoring the next generation through Tennis Central, Rob's journey proves that leadership isn't just about what you achieve, it's about how many people you lift up along the way. Rob, it's clear you've mastered not just the art of the backhand, but also the art of servant leadership. And while you may have a trophy, shelf with a full of accolades, it's your dedication to your family, community, and colleagues that truly makes you a Hall of Fame, material. To our listeners, if today's episode inspired you, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share your conversation with someone who could use a little extra inspiration. Until next time, keep leading with service. And remember, real leaders don't just call the shots, they make the assist. I'm Nicholas Paulukow signing off. See you on the next episode of the Servant Leadership Library.